Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming, spending your evening with us. My name is Vi. I go by V Input Output. I have a couple notes for you today before we get started. First, our special guests, the developers of Celeste, were unfortunately just not able to make it in time. They're actually getting in. Their flight lands like right after we're done with this. So I'm sorry to announce that to you, but we're still going to have a good time here today. Second note, we will have a Q&A towards the end. So if you have any questions, we would kind of ask that you hold them. If you can't stay the whole time or something like that, just give your question to a friend, have them ask it for you, and remember that all the panels will be recorded and put on YouTube at a later time. So that's pretty much it for our opening notes. We can get started with...
Who the heck are we? So I'm amyrlinn. I run A Hat in Time, Freeze Me, Epistory Typing Chronicles. I don't know if you could consider Super Meat Boy an indie at this point because it's so huge, but it started as an indie game, so I'll go ahead and count it.
Hi, I'm Konasumi. I run a lot of strange indie games. I run A Hat in Time, Freeze Me, Omnibus, Densha DD, and many more games.
I'm MunchaKoopas. I run Shovel Knight. I also work at Yacht Club Games as a quality assurance tester.
I'm TGH, currently run Celeste. I used to run indies like Undertale, Fez, Die, and have done Undertale and Die at previous GDQs as well.
And I'm V Input Output. I started running with 140 and Thoth, 2 games by the lead designer of Limbo and Inside, and I picked those games up as well. And I've also run Tumbleseed, which is a roguelike made for the Switch, and Softbody, which you may have seen yesterday at SGDQ.
So, there's a lot of talk in the community. A lot of people tend to focus on the bigger games like Mario, Zelda. I'm sure you all know. The hype around Mario Odyssey, it's going to be shown in this GDQ, hopefully, if we get the bonus incentive. So why speedrun indie games, necessarily? So you can be the first person to give it exposure. You can be the one that becomes known for the game. You can attach your name to it. I'm sure everybody still recognizes TGH as the Undertale guy, despite the fact that, you don't run it that much anymore.
It's been several years.
Yeah.
It's been like a year.
You can interact directly with the developers. The Hat in Time developers are super open with us. They're in our speedrunning Discord, and they have their own roles, so people can talk to them directly. They're separated by artists, coders, and everybody is able to ask them any questions they want. Routing, there's something about routing a game for the first time that you can really make it yours. You can put your own twist on the tricks. If a 1-frame trick or a 2-frame trick is too hard for you, you can figure out your own way around it. Maybe it's faster. Who knows? And obviously, you run a niche game, and so you can tell all your friends that you have the world record in train drifting. I'm sorry, Kona.
Wow.
I love Densha DD, but it's so good.
Yeah. It's all good.
I guess I can talk a bit about the cons. So obviously potential are smaller communities because the game is smaller. Some games like Celeste or Shovel Knight generally don't have this problem. Hat in Time doesn't suffer from this because those games are widely popular. But for some like Hyper Light Drifter, there's maybe 5 of us at a time for months. So if you're getting into it with the purpose of joining a giant community, that's not really the way to go. But it depends on what game you're playing.
Yeah, as an example, if anyone saw the Freeze Me run this morning, that everybody on camera, that was the Freeze Me community. There is nobody outside of it in the community.
That's all of us.
That's it, all 5.
Also, since the game is new, you're going to find a lot of new tricks right off the bat and a lot of new glitches. For me, that can sometimes be exhausting because if you're trying to learn a route, I just like playing the game. I like letting other people do all the routing. I'll admit I'm very lazy. I am more fond of executing, but that said, when Hyper Light Drifter launched, every 5 minutes there was some new sequence break or something happening, and so I eventually just said I'm gonna wait a week and then figure this out. I don't know if you guys have any similar stories.
Yeah, it was kind of like that with the Hat in Time once that came out. The community was really active when it released. Found a bunch of crazy things.
Yeah, one of our friends, Shockwave, he literally said, "I'm just gonna take a month off from a Hat in Time. I'm not gonna run it at all, and then in a month I'm gonna learn the route." So
Yeah, it's the same with Celeste. Like, it seems like even still, like something every day is getting found, even for any percent, and for other routes as well. But yeah, it's like it's almost better off. You're almost better off like taking like a week or even more off and just coming back and then like learning everything in one go and not having to worry about constantly readjusting your route or your like assorted strats for every level.
Last con, obviously, you run a niche game. It's a pro and a con because if no one wants to watch your game, it's not going to be accepted into marathons. Or at least a better talking point would be it's not going to get into every marathon every time because it's maybe enjoyable the first time, but maybe not much has changed between like SGDQ and AGDQ. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
So about choosing a game to run, and really this advice goes for any game, but especially for indie games, you want to pick something that you're going to enjoy. And it's always, you always can feel frustrated at your game, but if you're genuinely not enjoying the challenge, what's the point? What's the point in even doing speedruns of it, right? And yeah, typical characteristics of appealing speed games: active community with good resources, with easy movement, fast resetting, and even like speedrunning tools as well, and many more. Those can help make the experience a lot more appealing and more enjoyable.
yeah, and I know it's fun to like bag on your speed game, but if you're one of like 2 people who run it, bagging on it is not going to make other people want to come into the community and help you and find stuff with you.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll touch on this a moment because like I wait for video games to tell me that I should speedrun them, if that makes sense. I got that from Shovel Knight and Hyper Light Drifter. If you guys have any similar stories like that?
That's very well worded, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for me, like Celeste, I was actually gifted Celeste, and I would never have tried to learn the speedrun if I didn't really, really enjoy the movement. The same with any other game, like even non-indie games that I play. It's like I have to enjoy the game. I have to really enjoy the game and really enjoy running it, and just the general mechanics.
It's worth noting that besides the first, it's really important, as TJ Munch said, to enjoy the game. The rest of these aren't really hard and fast rules, but they are really good pieces of advice to take if you're trying to find your first speed game, your first indie speed game, or a game that's outside of any genre you've run so far. Really good. It makes it a lot easier to get into a game if it follows these guidelines.
Pioneering a game. I can take the lead on this one.
Yeah.
So when I started running Shovel Knight, the any percent route bought a lot of items, and we broke a lot of checkpoints, because checkpoints in that game, they will give you gold if you break them, and then they stop functioning as checkpoints. So the early routes would break all the checkpoints in the first 2 levels, meaning if you died, you would go all the way back to the beginning. Because I was bad, I didn't like that, so I decided to run the game low percent style, so with no upgrades. I thought, okay, I'll learn how to get good at the game, like you do in Street Fighter, before I move on to the more advanced characters or combos or whatever. And so I was pretty much obsessed with finding new ways to make Shovel Knight faster. If you've played Shovel Knight before, the lava level to Lost City, the 4th room in the game features this big beetle with a green butt, and you can bounce on it. You're supposed to ride the beetle for about 20 seconds to the end of the room, but there's one enemy in there that bounces around, and if you maneuver things right, he will fly in the exact spot you need to jump over this last gap, bounce on him, and land on the next platform safely. And as far as I know, I was the first person in the world to successfully get that to work. But I had a lot of help with a lot of the things in early Shovel Knight, mostly from my friends Azulag and Busta Wolf, who were constantly looking for new things. I see Alex back there. He also helped find a lot of low percent stuff. But I've never had more fun than when I was initially involved with Shovel Knight. Well, how about you guys?
Well, Kona and I mod Hat in Time, and that game was really interesting in its infancy because it has 3 separate leaderboards on speedrun.com. There's the alpha, the beta, and then the full game release. Something we instituted in the full game release is, and I think this would be a really good idea if you're like, if you have new people coming into your community and they are like, hey, I want to run low percent one-handed blindfolded. One of the rules we have is if you want to get your game in a miscellaneous category on the leaderboard, it's got to have 3 runners. And if you want to get into main category, it's got to have 10 runners. And that's just, some loose rules we set in to prevent category. Like, if I look at a speedrun.com board and a game has 15 categories with 1 runner each, and it's the same one guy across 7 or 8 categories, I'm not going to be too interested in running it because I know they haven't put a lot of time into thinking about the game or like optimizing anything. It more smacks of a guy just looking for free records. I want a competition when I get into a game. It doesn't matter how big it is. So I encourage people who are looking into indie games and setting up their own boards to really try and make every category competitive, no matter how big it is.
Yeah, having to have set up a couple of speedrun.com leaderboards myself, I know definitely that I'm guilty of adding too many categories at once and saying, yeah, I'll get to this eventually. So in that regard, I'm definitely going to agree with amyrlinn and say, do as I say, not as I do. Don't do that to yourself. Don't put things far in the future that you say, oh, I'll get around to it. Just have a cleaner leaderboard rather than a sprawled out one.
It also means you have to remember the rules for all those categories.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And that could be a pain.
Right. Should we move on?
So, yeah, with community building, communities for speedrunning is obviously important, I'm sure as many of you know. It allows people to get together and team up, glitch hunt, discuss the game that they love playing. And using Discord is a really, really good tool. So if you're the first person to speedrun a game, consider making a Discord and format it nicely, get invite links out, and just make it a general nice place for discussion. Make it welcoming and inviting, because that can be a very valuable tool for increasing the popularity of a game.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's you and like 3 people just screaming strats at each other about the game, then you feel like there's other people out there that share the same passion for the game that you do, and that makes it a lot easier to run.
All right, routing and glitch hunting. So, again, if you're getting into an indie game, maybe it just released, or maybe it's been out but no one's played it ever before, you're going to want to know some things about routing. And obviously, with indie games, there's a multitude of different genres that all have something going for them. For a lot of games, especially like platformers, 2D or 3D, you want to remember the shortest distance between 2 points is generally a line. So you want to figure out what line you can take from point A to point B, wherever you need to go, as quickly as possible with the fastest movement as possible. There are some games that have you manage resources, so you want to always keep track of what's available and where, in what levels it's available, and when you have access to it and when you want to spend those resources. You want to keep in mind that going faster in one place, especially if you're spending a resource to do it, may allow you to not go fast in another place, whereas saving something may allow you to go faster in a later area, and that will let the overall run be faster. And it's really important, especially when you're routing a game for the first time, to always test every idea that you have, no matter how silly you may think it is, or even if you think it's slower, because you never know what is going to work in a speedrun. And you want to time every idea as best as you can. Some people, I know for me, it's rough to get out live split and have to do the same segment over and over until I get it perfect, just so I know exactly how much time it takes, but it's a really good habit to be in.
Yeah, it's always very important to time your ideas, because in pretty much every one of the games I've run, we found a segment that we didn't like doing, but it was faster, and we didn't know that at the time, so we were just like, oh, we hate doing this route, we're not going to do it, we're going to do something else. And until we had someone sit down and time it and say, okay, this is exactly 10 seconds faster, if you do this perfectly, you're going to save 10 seconds on your run, did it give us all the impetus to go, all right, I guess now we have to get better at the game instead of making excuses and just going the easy way.
I think in that light, it's definitely also important to personalize your own strats as well. that's not necessarily like making your own strats, but just like, you know, doing strats in a way that feel comfortable for you. Like, so for instance, if you wanted to go that way, even though it was slower, if it's more comfortable for you to do that, then by all means, like, you shouldn't be afraid to do that just because it's a little bit slower, you know, especially if it's negligible. But yeah, so definitely personalization of that is definitely very important as well.
Yeah, and that can come down to like setups too. You know, if you have a certain pixel that you like to go for that nobody else really likes to go for, it's your strat. You do what you want. So, one of the really, and I'm going to keep referring to A Hat in Time because it's hands down the best indie game I've ever run because the community interaction is so incredibly useful. The devs actually put the 1.0 version, which is the version we use to run, on a separate Steam branch for us. So it's very easy for new runners to patch into the game. All they have to do is just change the branch, and they're right there in it. They don't have to develop any kind of complicated down patcher. We don't have to be changing Steam variables, none of that. It's very easy.
It's the same situation for both 140 and Thoth, which I run. They both have a branch that lets you download the legacy version of the game directly, because there's different physics in between each. So it's definitely good to be aware of those, especially if you separate a current version of a game from its legacy version.
If a game doesn't have native support for down patching, you can use a tool called SteamDB to basically download older versions through Steam. There's a whole guide on how to do it. I don't think we'll be going into detail too much on that during this panel, but it is very useful if you want to see what older versions are like and testing out strats and all of that.
And, you know, learning something like Cheat Engine, I know a couple of my friends have used it to make load removers for games, and it's a useful skill to know. It's not necessarily the most applicable to every situation, especially because a lot of games can store their addresses dynamically, which means they change between every time you load up the game, and that can lead to problems when, you know, trying to find the timer or trying to find the loading variable. But you know, if you have the skills and the time to try and mess around with Cheat Engine, it's useful.
Or you get lucky and hope Derby runs your speed game and then he'll make one for you.
There you go.
Yeah, he did that for Shovel Knight, and it's honestly almost as good as the actual debug mode I use at Yacht Club. It's like one fly cheat away from being the same thing. But that's helped a lot of runners, I know specifically. But like you mentioned, amyrlinn, the pointers change. So every time Shovel Knight updates, all of that information Derby has for all the locations for the boss rooms, that changes every single patch. So every time he has to go back in, find the new number values, and put them back in the program. I don't know what possesses him to be so nice and generous with his time, but I'm thankful that he is. Anyway, moving on. More tools.
And this is just going back to the load remover thing. I'm going to shout him out because he helped me understand a little more about this. Fun Cannon, who's sitting in the crowd, made a load remover for Dying Light. And it was really interesting to see him just go through the process of, okay, I know this variable. Has it changed? No. Good. Has this changed? Yes. All right, now I got to run the game for a little bit, figure out where it's changed to. And it makes running the game so much easier because the in-game timer doesn't work. It's faster than real time, which is a really weird problem to have when you're running a game like that. But also because it's PC-based, loads are unfair between platforms, so...
Anyone else have anything on Autosplitters?
Celeste has an in-game timer, right? Yeah.
It does, yep. In-game timer, Devil Squirrel developed an autosplitter for... Devil Squirrel's the same guy who made the task as well for Celeste. And it actually, yeah, exactly. It stops between levels. It directly hooks into the game to track in-game time, which is very, very useful, especially for like developing community sum of best and personal sum of bests as well. It's very, very... just very useful, very accurate, and it's just very useful.
As mentioned, LiveSplit has native support for Autosplitters, and if you develop one for your game or you have someone in the community who does, they can actually make a pull request on LiveSplit itself in GitHub and get their Autosplitter automatically downloaded whenever anyone downloads LiveSplit, so anyone is available to use the Autosplitter for that game.
Yeah, there's a bunch of bigger indie games that have that support. Hat in Time, does Shovel Knight?
We have an auto splitter, but it unfortunately suffers from the same problems that Flitterby's cheat engine tool does, is that the pointers change every single patch, so the auto splitter has to be completely rebuilt from the ground up every single patch. So at the moment, no.
Soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Oh boy.
So yeah, we've talked about this briefly in previous slides, but developer interaction, especially with modern day indie games, can be really important. Like for amyrlinn and I, the Hat in Time developers have been nothing but amazing ever since the alpha and betas. They've been in our Discord, have been extremely supportive, listening to our complaints, and overall, it's been a really amazing experience. And they've been tightly integrated with our community ever since that.
Yeah, I know a couple things were specifically changed from the beta to the full game because we were like, hey, this feels weird. And Jonas, the creator, said, okay, I understand where that's coming from. I'm going to try to change that so it doesn't impact the casual experience, but makes it nicer for you.
Yeah, we actually have a dev chat, exclusive, or not exclusive, but like it's a dedicated developer chat where players, speedrunners, and developers can interact with each other and talk to each other about different things, developer related, game related, and it's a mutual benefiting relationship for both of us because, like, for devs, you know, speedrunners are basically your dream beta testers. Just because, you know, we play the game more than anybody else does, like, ever. So even maybe more than the devs themselves, maybe, but probably not. But whatever. But yeah. So, and in return, you know, like, they help us out, and they are very, very in with the community, and they help us out a lot, and they patch things, like, for instance, like Matt Thorson, Noah Berry, they're the co-developers for Celeste, and they patch things immediately after we find them. Like, I found some things that were patched the very next day in the next version, you know, that were wrong with the game or that they considered bugs, and they were fixed the next day. So they're very, very responsive to the community.
Yeah, Yacht Club has always been supportive of speedrunners. To give you an idea of like how supportive, there's certain enemies in the game that spawn on the world map, like in Mario Brothers 3, and they will wander around the map semi-randomly, and that really ruins speedruns because you'd get about 45 minutes in, and you'd have like 6 of these things on the end of the map, and so all you'd have to do is go into a level, exit the level, and hope they move out of your way. Yacht Club didn't like that, so instead they actually made it so the enemies will only spawn on the map at certain points of in-game time. So that if you're going fast enough, they will never interfere with your run, which is an incredible boon to most of us.
That's really cool. I knew they'd done
Yeah.
something about that, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, they specifically hard-coded it to do that. There are some other things where, like ahead of release, they catch things that they know they don't want speedrunners doing, but that's from a more game design perspective. Like the final 2 bosses of Spectre of Torment, you have a lantern item that reflects projectiles and is supposed to charge when it comes into contact with an enemy. It deals no damage to the final boss, nor can the final boss charge it, because if it did, you could just stand on one platform and kill it in about 3 seconds. And that's, while speedrun friendly, that's not exactly fun or technical, so they completely got rid of that.
Was that something you found in beta testing?
No, that's something they found immediately when they made it. The programmer finished it, tested it, and went, no. I mean, a lot of my job is finding a lot of bugs, and so it's interesting for me to, especially with like new content, which I won't get into too much, to just find something that I think, hey, this would be neat to like keep in the game in some way to then show off later, and they're open to that. In the Plague of Shadows campaign, there's actually, when it first launched, there was a way for you to bind both of your attack buttons to the same button, and what that did is it allowed Plague Knight to charge his jump while throwing more bombs. And so what that let you do is gain infinite height. That has been removed from the basic Plague Knight game, but if you wanted to play that way, there's a cheat code that lets you do that. It's banned for speedrun purposes, obviously. But if you wanted to toy around with it, you could. Trying to think of something else I've done recently.
I was going to say, that actually reminded me, Refunked.
Yes.
So we found a glitch in Refunct, which is like a 3D puzzle platformer, I guess you would call it, where if you hit a button and reset within 20 frames or something like that, it activates the button and then restarts the game with a button active. And we found this mode, and 2 days later the dev patched it, and now you can. He tried to introduce a mode where you could select between normal and glitched, and nobody in the community liked that because we're like, no normal player of this game is going to hit a button and reset within, a 1/10 of a second. That's just not happening.
Yeah, it was just not going to happen during casual play. It was a very technical trick.
Yeah. And then he tried to do a different way where you hold control and hit it, and eventually he just reverted it to where it was before because the speedrun community as a whole was not really feeling it.
Yeah, the developer of a game called Iconoclasts, we keep finding more and more bugs in his game, and instead of just blatantly removing them, he'll put in different button combinations that allow us to do them. One example is at any save statue in the game, you hold down, I think it's your weapon swap button, no, your fire button, and then if you hit your weapon swap button, it takes you to a secret menu that allows you to craft your upgrades. That is normally not possible at a save statue, but again, he removed it and then put back in for us to do it. And he's done that with other sequence breaks in the game to make it fun for the speedrunners, but so that a casual player will never experience it, ideally. But I don't know, it depends on the developer. Some developers seem to like removing everything for whatever reason, and some understand why speedrunners find these things fun, so like Konjac, they try and put them back in. I guess ways to be in contact with the devs. Twitter and Discord are great, as I'm sure you would all agree. One nice thing about indie devs is if you want to talk to Steve at Yacht Club Games, that's his email. It's Steve at Yacht Club Games. It's that easy. Twitch is also another good one. You can find a lot of indie devs doing pixel art on Twitch. That's actually how I got involved in testing another game. I went into the developer's chat and said, hey, your game looks cool. Do you need any testing? I expected them to say no. His response was, yes, when can you start? How's next week sound? And sure enough, a week later, I was working on the project. Anyway, how about you guys?
Discord is particularly good if you have a report with the dev and they're in your Discord. I know with several of the games that I've run, we've actually been given beta access to like a future update, content addition, or plan changes by the dev because they want feedback from us. But yeah, any way to get in contact with your developer is good. You can even use, one way I got into contact with the soft body developer was when my friend and I started running the game, we ran into all these bugs and we took to the Steam forum to report them. And we got a response back immediately from the developer of that game. And he was able to fix most of those within a week.
Yeah. We do religiously read Steam forums. Don't think that those are ignored by developers, just so you know. That's the first thing I do when I get into work every morning is see if there are any bugs on Steam for me to reproduce. Moving on.
So,
Love this picture.
it's a good picture. It's a very good picture. But yeah, for this panel, we got some interviews with some developers. Jonas Karlev is the lead designer, programmer, pretty much most of A Hat in Time. He created the game. And I basically asked him what were his overall thoughts on the speedrunning community when it began. What does he think of it now? And if you look at the quote at the bottom, it gives an actual example of a change that was made to the game due to speedrunner input. It was the Hat in Time jump dive. And that was during the alpha and beta phase of the game. But yeah, it's really amazing when developers acknowledge speedrunners, and yeah, that relationship is really important. But yeah, Jonas also gave me another good point in terms of patching exploits. Basically, the Gears for Breakfast, they only patch skips that can interfere with casual play, and that's a pretty important guideline for them.
And so that mod was made by one of the actual developers. He was like, "What do we need? We need an animation of Hat Kid dabbing." But one of the skips they actually did patch, and part of the reason they have 1.0 on a Steam branch is there's a pretty big skip in the final level of the game where we can go outside of it and then go around the entire level. If you guys are going to watch A Hat in Time, you will definitely see it. They patched that, and at first we weren't very happy about it because part of our rapport with Jonas, he had told us, I'm not going to patch anything that speedrunners will use that casuals will never find. And he told us that casual players had been watching our stream and then reproducing this glitch for themselves. And it completely ruined their whole experience of the final level. Like, it's meant to be this very, epic struggle, fight to the finish, like, platforming section, and instead you just scoot across the top.
Yeah, and the thing about that skip is that you get out of bounds by going through a hole in the collision. It's just a hole. You don't clip through it. It's a big hole in the corner of the map. So it's incredibly easy to access, which I'm sure played a big role in getting that skip patched.
Yeah.
All right, so Rami Ismail is the co-founder of Lambier, indie games company they may have heard of. He made this Twitter thread around the end of AGDQ 2018, talking about some of the ways in which runners in general talk about their game, both at the event and in general, talk about their speed game. And he has some good things to say about this.
I saw this tweet when it was, or I saw this thread when it was made live, and he words this very well.
Yeah.
Clearly has respect for speedrunning as a thing that exists in this current age of game development. So.
Oh, hey, we have more.
Yeah, and I think the whole thread is still there, right?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, his whole thread, yeah, it's still up on Twitter. But yeah.
And what's his Twitter handle for those who want to see it?
THA_Rami.
Cool.
All right.
So I'd encourage you to look at what he has to say just in general. A lot of what I see retweeted from other people is really insightful.
Yeah. I think we can move into Q&A. Should I show off this thing first?
Yeah,
guys
let's
want-
let's do it before that.
All right. I'll show you one bug. One sec.
You're wrapping it around the monitor.
That's okay.
Now it won't get away.
Yeah. I want to wait a sec.
Cool. Good? All right. You might be wondering what I'm about to do. I won't explain it, I'll just do it. Okay. I missed. If you go one more tile to the right, you end up stuck in an infinite screen transition loop. I can try it again. Well, let's take some
Yeah.
questions while I try. So
right.
take it away, guys. Oh, and someone repeat the questions. I'll mute the music.
All right, yeah. Any questions from the audience?
Yes.
And the question was asking if the bug was in the current version of Shovel Knight.
That's really good.
Gary J wants to know, when is Brilliant Bob? Brilliant Bob, for those who don't know, is an indie platformer that got removed from Steam because the developer, I don't know, had some shady stuff going on in terms of Steam keys. It's a very good game, kind of.
It's not. It's
It's pretty bad. I played it. It's pretty bad.
like we say don't bag on your speed game, but if it is legitimately bad,
Objectively bad.
don't play the game.
In the back. All right. The question was, then why do you play Freeze Me? Why do we play Freeze Me?
This is an unpopular opinion among everyone I know, but I legitimately think Freeze Me is a pretty decent run.
I think
Not
the
a
same.
good game, but it's a very good run because the tech in it is actually a lot of fun to execute. There's a lot of really stupid things that you can do. There's a lot of broken things that, if you saw the run, we've told the dev about a bunch of things that are wrong, and he just doesn't fix them. And so we go, okay, I guess that means we're cool with it.
That's the opposite of how that works.
Hey, man.
Yeah, any more questions?
Yeah, that's really good.
Yes. The question was, did I discover this bug? The answer is yes, I did. The other question was how. The answer was I was bored. Changes were made to the fishing rod. I was told to go try stuff. Okay. So to explain what's going on, let me get back up here and then I can explain a little bit. I won't bother continuing trying, unfortunately. It's just too hard to set up. But the reason this works is because in Shovel Knight Collision, like at the top of the screen, there's invisible collision called blockers that prevent you from traversing through vertical transition rooms without using the transition point, which in Shovel Knight is all the ladders. So the way this works is when you lower the one player into the bottom screen and then bring them back up, the collision in the screen below is not loaded yet. So when they load into the room, they're inside the collision. And there's a lot of various things you can do in Shovel Knight to get around collision, but only in places where the blockers don't exist because they are not placed there. This is one of those places because no one ever thought you could do something like this.
I will say, if any of that went over anyone's head, trust me, that's how familiar you get with these games.
I think we had a question in the back.
Yeah.
All right. The question was, what is each of ours favorite indie game, casual or speedrun wise? And I can say with complete confidence that A Hat in Time is the best indie game I've personally ever played in terms of speedrun and casual. Just so many great things about it that make it such a whole experience.
I like Hat in Time speedrunning. I think it's really good. I actually prefer Epistory Typing Chronicles casually. Honestly, it's a very relaxing game. It's like typing of the Dead if it weren't about shooting zombies. Instead, you're controlling a girl on a fox who's, I don't know, I don't want to spoil the story because the story is incredible. It's really like I encourage you guys to play it. This is my one selling out point for the day. Go play Epistory.
For me, it's definitely Celeste, for sure. I'm sure none of you guys are surprised by that. So the close. I mean, it's a good. Die is very good.
I like
Die is
Die.
very good, but Celeste, you can tell has like just so much work put into just fine tuning the game itself. And the one thing that Celeste has that I think other indie platformers or other platformers in general don't have is an amazing story. Like the story itself is just incredible. Teaches people a lot about what people go through with depression and with that kind of thing, with self struggle, and it's I learned a lot from it. I definitely did. Even though I don't actually suffer from depression, it made me realize what people go through who do, and it also it helped me like see myself differently, to be honest with you. And that's why I like Celeste so much. Plus, it's just a damn satisfying game as well.
I'm going to go with Shovel Knight and Shovel Knight.
Now, I do feel like for a lot of speedrunners, especially of indie games, the answer casually is going to be the same as the answer for a speedrun. Myself, it's a little different. I like Limbo and Inside casually probably better than the other games I run, but I got to stay with 140. It's been my favorite speedrun. They're all made by the same person, gameplay-wise, and you can really tell just how the designer, Jeppe Carlsen, absolutely shines through in every game that he touches.
This is really for everyone. What is the one glitch, skip, bug that you found that you're the most proud of speedrun-wise?
The question is, what is the skip or bug that you may have found in a game that is your favorite? Or or most proud of. Yeah.
I did okay. I found it and then I was super lazy and didn't test it, and someone else tested it, and it saves a minute. In Epistory, you go onto these unlock points and you unlock a greater part of the map. You have to press a button to go into typing mode, and we figured out that there's a setting you can change in the game where you have to manually take yourself in and out of typing mode. Otherwise, it'll do it automatically. And if you set that to where you have to manually turn it on and off, and you go onto one of the unlock points, you can hit things from farther away, and that winds up saving time because you don't have to like run up to obstacles to clear them.
So,
Go for it.
so I don't do a lot of glitch hunting usually, but when I was a part of the Freeze Me open beta program, I yeah, I found about 24 hours before the game launched on Steam, I found a way to infinitely wall jump any wall in the entire game, and that is used in many of the levels in the speedrun, and it's a very impactful trick.
I think mine is probably the one I mentioned earlier with that birder in Lost City. I have all of these on YouTube, or most of them are still in runs. A lot of the things that I found in the early days of Shovel Knight and Plague Knight are still used today, which amazes me. One of my favorites is probably the Propeller Knight kill. If any of you have played Shovel Knight, you know that boss is generally considered to be very difficult. I found a way to kill him in about 5 seconds. So I actually could show it off probably if we can get the Wii U back up, but that's up to you, Noah. Okay, I can read that.
Let's do it.
I'll continue on. For myself, in 140, which if you don't know is a rhythm platformer, 4 years after the game was initially released, the developer decided to come back to it and make a whole 4th level to add to the game, just as basically free DLC. So the first thing that was fun was us getting beta access to that and everyone basically independently finding all these major skips, which a major skip in the game is between 3 and 7 seconds. That's how super optimized the game is. But then, yeah, we all came together to find those basically on our own and then shared them all with each other and had a laugh over that. Then later on, someone found a really extremely major skip that saves about a minute because you skip an entire orb activation in a whole level, and it also makes the level super easier. So after that, we had to rework the final level of the game just a little bit. And so my favorite thing that I found in that is just not even a skip or a glitch. It's just a super consistent setup to get the final orb of the game. And it's just, that stuck with me as something like that I found that I feel like no one else would have ever thought of. And that's a really good feeling.
I don't have much to add, honestly. I'm like, I don't really find glitches in games, to be honest with you. I'm not a pioneer in that regard, but I think the biggest thing I've probably found was in Undertale, you can actually wrong warp into rooms using text boxes instead of like actually using the punch card. If you guys know anything about the Undertale speedrun, it involves heavy use of an item called the punch card, which is actually a joke item in the game added, I guess, as an afterthought by the developer, Toby Fox. And you can use that to bring up text boxes and move on the screen with text boxes still up. And if you close a text box as you leave the screen, you wrong warp to the default debug position of that next room. By the way, my good friend Snowy is actually running Undertale, I believe, on Friday. Is it Friday?
Mm-hmm.
Cookie, no? Saturday? Oh, Saturday. Yeah, so check that run out if you guys want to see some real punch card action. But yeah, so I found that it saves like 1 second in the run, and it's not important.
But hey.
All right. I guess I'll give it one attempt, and then we can take more questions.
All right.
There we go.
Hey.
Yeah, to give you a brief explanation, you can cancel your ground-based attacks with a jump. So when I attack him, I hold the other direction, jump, and hit attack again. So that's how I get the back and forth hits. And depending on how soon you hit him before he starts his second set of lunges, he will either go to the top right or the top left. According to the game's code, the way I do this, he should never go to the top left. I've asked the developers why. They don't know. I don't know. It works. I don't care. Anyway, more questions. You.
Not at all for me personally. If I enjoy the game, I'll play and stream it and speedrun it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The question, if I understood correctly, was when choosing to stream a new game on Twitch, if it's an indie, like, does the fact that it's an indie game turn us off from streaming it? Okay.
I definitely I have the same view as Kona. I'm not partnered, so it does honestly, I think we can all kind of accept the fact that like partnership is a reason that people will pick certain games because it does impact their viewership. At the end of the day, this is their job some of the time, and so if they play a new game, it could impact their bottom line. But I'm not partnered, and I like playing games. And if people are gonna watch it, cool. If they're not gonna watch it, I'm still gonna have a good time with it.
I would say no, personally. It doesn't turn me off, regardless of the fact that could happen, could turn off viewers. But I will say that as a mainly interactive streamer with my chat, it was really hard to adjust to a game like Celeste because there's extremely little downtime in the run. Requires 110% focus on every little movement, everything I do. Requires me to be looking at the screen and not at the chat. It doesn't stop me from looking at the chat and dying, but whatever. But still, it's very hard. But I have a ton of fun speedrunning the game, so I still speedrun it. And I've learned how to do it. I've learned how to simultaneously sometimes look at chat, maybe divide my attention slightly. But most of the time, it still comes at the expense of my gameplay. So it's whatever. I do what I have fun doing. And Celeste is what I have fun doing right now. So I would say no.
I don't stream much anymore. I don't have time. But in my as a gamer, I generally don't like a lot of AAA games these days. They just don't really have anything for me. Whereas indie games will usually have some sort of unique mechanic or new idea or something that I have never seen before, and that's what really interests me. Yeah. We have time for one more? Okay. Amber? Mm-hmm. Hyper Light Drifter is a very interesting video game. The question was, are there any things indie devs should not do when interacting with the speedrun community? And I'm not throwing shade at the Hyper Light devs. I know Alex, I know Teddy. They're very nice people, and they're very supportive of the community. They think what we do is really cool. But during the early days of the game's release, they came into our Discord, and they were very confused as to why we didn't want to run on the most current patch that fixes a lot of issues what they felt were issues. And they also occasionally had random Steam branches open that we didn't know what they did, but one of them was called Fast Collision. And after we figured out what that patch did, we had 6 new categories in about 20 minutes. It took us about a day to realize that the bugs that were possible on that patch made the run so boring that no one wanted to use them anyway. So we went back to using like the day one patch. Oddly enough, now all of the people from the community that wanted to run on the day one patch are gone, and most of it is current patch runners, which is kind of how I wanted it in the first place. But anyway, I would say the thing that the indie devs should not do is don't just patch out everything immediately and like try to understand why runners enjoy finding bugs. It's not that, like, I think you guys might agree, it's not that we enjoy like desecrating the thing you've made, it's that we've been playing games for so long, we like finding new interactions in those games, and like the bugs are the most unique interactions. How about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with that point. Listening to the community is really important. Going back to what Jonas of A Hat in Time said, if a casual player is unlikely to perform like a double frame perfect trick to get some super specific outcome, then maybe it shouldn't be patched. You got to think about how it's going to impact the casual experience and the speedrunning experience, and just take all that in.
I have a more concrete example from a game I ran called Poi.
Oh yes.
Don't make your timer running all of the time, even on the main menu, because when you start file 1 on Poi, it counts all of the time you spent in the main menu, as well as all of the time you spent playing the game before that. So, for some reason, Poi always has to have a timer running. So we were getting people who were like failing to PB despite getting, PB times by their live split trackers. And we hunted and couldn't figure out why. And we eventually asked the devs, hey, he's getting like 48-minute RTA times when his PB in the game is like 52 because it records you on a leaderboard at the end. Why is this happening? And they go, oh, well, you should play on file 2 because file 1, if you don't have a file loaded, is always running. So I wish I knew. I wish I knew why they did this. And even if you delete the file, it still keeps your timer from that file running. So you can't get through a run on file 1 and then reset and expect your time to reset. It won't do that. It will keep going.
But yeah, that's pretty much all we had time for tonight, mostly. But yeah, if anyone else wants to add anything before we head off.
Yeah, anything's...
Any shout outs, anybody? If you do have questions, we will be here all week, I think.
Yeah.
So just grab one of us if you have questions about anything. But thank you all for coming. This has been wonderful. And thank you.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.